The bathroom fan hums its monotonous rhythm, a mechanical heartbeat that fills the silence of my apartment like white noise. I sit at the kitchen table, half dressed in yesterday's t-shirt and boxers, my fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee that went cold an hour ago. The ceramic feels foreign against my palms, too smooth, too warm for how numb I feel inside. Steam curls beneath the bathroom door in lazy tendrils, ghostly fingers reaching across the hardwood floor. The pipes groan behind the walls. Old Brooklyn plumbing that protests every use, every demand for hot water in a building that's seen decades of tenants come and go. I know the sound by heart now. 6 months of listening to Damien shower in the morning, brush his teeth at night, exist just 20 feet away from where I sleep. The door creaks open with that familiar squeal of hinges that need oil. I don't look up from my coffee, but I feel the shift in air pressure, the way warmth and moisture spill into the kitchen like an exhale. Footsteps pad across the floor, bare feet on wood, confident and unhurried. "Sorry," he says, and his voice carries that rough morning quality that makes my chest tighten. "Water's out in my building again. Just needed one shower." I nod without lifting my eyes, studying the dark surface of my coffee as if it holds answers to questions I'm too afraid to ask. But in my peripheral vision, I see him, Damien at 31, standing in my kitchen doorway with a towel slung low around his hips, water still beating on his shoulders, his dark hair pushed back and dripping onto the floor. Morning light filters through the window behind him, casting his silhouette in gold, and for a moment he looks less like my roommate and more like something I might sketch in the margins of my sketchbook when I think no one is looking. He moves through my space like he's always belonged here, reaching for my coffee mug without asking, taking a slow sip while his eyes find mine over the rim. There's something different in his expression this morning, something that makes my pulse quicken and my hands fidget against the table. He doesn't drink coffee. Never has. Always claims it makes him jittery. But he takes another sip anyway, as if testing the boundaries of this moment, seeing how far he can push into my morning routine. The silence stretches between us, not uncomfortable, but weighted with something I can't name. Steam still rises from his skin, and I catch the scent of my own soap on him, sandalwood and mint, familiar and foreign all at once. He sets the mug down carefully, deliberately, and I watch his fingers linger on the handle. This isn't the first time he's used my shower. His building's hot water has been unreliable for weeks, and I've grown accustomed to the sound of water running at 7:30 in the morning, the humid air that follows him out of the bathroom, the way he emerges looking more awake than I ever feel before noon. It started as a practical arrangement between roommates, neighbors helping neighbors in a city where hot water is a luxury and privacy is negotiable. But something about today feels different. Maybe it's the way he doesn't immediately retreat to his room to dress, or how he moves through my kitchen with the confidence of someone who has earned the right to be here. Maybe it's the fact that he's still standing there, towel shifting slightly as he breathes, watching me with an expression I can't decipher. I force myself to take a sip of cold coffee, anything to fill the silence that's growing heavier by the second. The bitter liquid slides down my throat, and I grimace without meaning to. He notices. Of course he notices, and something that might be amusement flickers across his face. "You should make fresh coffee," he says, as if this is his kitchen too, as if he has opinions about my morning habits that matter. "I should do a lot of things," I reply, and immediately regret the honesty in my voice. There's too much in those words, too much truth about all the things I should be doing but don't, all the conversations I should be having but won't. He pads across the room to where I keep the coffee maker, his movements casual and purposeful. Water runs from the tap, the machine beeps to life, and I watch him navigate my space with the kind of familiarity that should alarm me but doesn't. When did he learn where I keep the filters? When did he start caring whether my coffee was hot or cold? The brewing process gives us both something to focus on that isn't each other, but I can feel his presence like gravity, pulling at the edges of my attention. He leans against the counter, arms crossed over his bare chest, and I force myself to look anywhere else. At the window, at my hands, at the sketches scattered across the table from last night's restless drawing session. "You were up late," he observes, nodding toward the papers covered in charcoal smudges and half-formed images. "Couldn't sleep," I admit, which is both true and insufficient. I was up late because I kept thinking about the way he'd said goodnight, lingering in my doorway like he wanted to say something else. I was up late because I've been carrying this weight in my chest for weeks now, this awareness of him that goes beyond the practical arrangements of shared living space. The coffee finishes brewing with a final hiss and gurgle. He pours 2 cups without asking if I want one, adding sugar to his own. When did he start drinking coffee? And sliding mine across the table. His fingers brush mine as I take the mug, and the contact sends electricity up my arm that I pretend not to feel. Better? He asks, and I realize he's been watching me taste the fresh coffee, waiting for my reaction like it matters to him. Better, I confirm, and mean it in ways that have nothing to do with caffeine. He should leave now. Get dressed, grab his work bag, head to whatever construction site needs his attention today. That's how these mornings usually go. Efficient exchanges, practical conversations, the careful choreography of 2 people sharing space without getting too close. But he doesn't leave. He settles into the chair across from me, still wearing only that towel, steam still rising from his shoulders like morning mist. The domesticity of it hits me square in the chest. Sharing coffee and underwear and towels, the easy silence of people who have grown comfortable with each other's rhythms. I study his face over my coffee mug, noting the way exhaustion sits around his eyes, the slight stubble he hasn't shaved yet, the relaxed set of his shoulders that tells me he slept well. When did I become someone who catalogs these details about another person? When did I start caring whether Damien slept through the night or tossed and turned like I do? My foreman's pushing back the start time today, he says, as if explaining why he's not rushing to get ready. Some permit issue with the city. I nod like this information is relevant to me, like I need to know the details of his work schedule. But the truth is, I do want to know. I want to understand the rhythm of his days, the frustrations he carries, the small victories that make him smile when he comes home covered in dust and sweat. The admission scares me more than I want to acknowledge. He reaches across the table and picks up one of my sketches, a drawing I started last night of hands holding a coffee cup, the kind of observational study that fills my sketchbooks. His thumb traces the charcoal lines, and I watch him examine my work with the same careful attention I've seen him give to blueprints and measurements at job sites. You draw like you're afraid someone's watching, he says, and the observation cuts deeper than I expect. Maybe I am, I reply, which is more honest than I intended to be. He sets the sketch down carefully, precisely aligned with the others, and looks at me with an expression I can't read. There's something in his eyes, curiosity, maybe, or recognition of something he's been trying to understand. The moment stretches between us, filled with all the things we don't say, all the questions we don't ask. Steam has stopped rising from his skin, but the air still feels thick with possibility and restraint. Outside, Brooklyn is waking up, traffic building, neighbors starting their days, the world moving forward while we sit frozen in this kitchen, caught between morning and whatever comes next. This is the moment I'll return to later, when I'm trying to understand how everything changed. Not some dramatic declaration or pivotal conversation, but this, coffee cooling in chipped mugs, charcoal smudges on paper, the weight of unspoken words settling around us like dust. He doesn't leave after that, and neither of us talks about it. I am a freelance illustrator by trade and by temperament, someone who has learned to find comfort in solitude, in the controlled chaos of charcoal and ink. My work fills the apartment like confessions I'm too afraid to voice aloud. Sketches line the walls, not displayed with any sense of pride, but tacked up with pushpins and painter's tape, as if I might need to tear them down quickly should anyone look too closely. The apartment itself reflects my careful cultivation of a quiet life. I switched from coffee to tea 2 years ago after a series of sleepless nights that left me hollow-eyed and shaking. Now I keep a collection of ceramic mugs and loose-leaf varieties that I tend like a garden. Plants crowd the windowsills, pothoes trailing toward the floor, a fiddle-leaf fig that demands weekly attention, succulents that forgive my occasional neglect. I water them with the devotion of someone who has learned that caring for living things is easier than caring for people. The air carries the scent of linseed oil from my easel and the ghost of sandalwood incense I burn when the city feels too loud. Everything here has been chosen deliberately, arranged to create the kind of sanctuary I never had growing up. A place where I can exist without explanation, where my rhythms matter more than anyone else's expectations. I met Damien 6 months ago through a Craigslist posting that read like desperation disguised as practicality. Room available immediately. Clean, quiet, responsible. References required. I had been living alone for 3 years and found myself drowning in rent increases that outpaced my irregular income. The idea of sharing my carefully constructed space felt like a betrayal of everything I had built, but necessity has a way of reshaping our boundaries. He arrived for the apartment viewing on a Tuesday afternoon, carrying a single duffel bag and wearing work boots that left scuff marks on my hardwood floor. Damien at 31 was everything I was not, broad-shouldered and loud-laughed, the kind of man who took up space without apology. He worked construction, he told me, mostly residential projects in Queens and Brooklyn. He had a gym routine that started at 5 in the morning and a guitar he claimed to play but never touched in my presence. I showed him the spare room with its single window and bare walls, explained the house rules about quiet hours, and shared kitchen responsibilities. He nodded at everything I said, but spent most of the tour looking at my artwork, pausing in front of a charcoal portrait I had drawn from memory, my sister at 16, laughing at something I could no longer remember. He said it was beautiful. Most people said my work was interesting or impressive, words that kept a careful distance. Beautiful felt like recognition of something I was trying to capture but couldn't name. He moved in 3 days later with that same duffel bag, a box of tools, and the guitar case that would lean against his bedroom wall like a promise he never kept. I expected our cohabitation to exist in parallel lines, two adults sharing utilities and square footage while maintaining the careful boundaries that make urban living possible. But Damien had never learned the art of occupying space quietly. He sang in the shower, hummed while cooking, left his work clothes draped over chairs like shed skins. He was forever shirtless, treating the apartment like an extension of a locker room, unself-conscious in his own body in ways that made me hyper-aware of mine. The contrast between us should have created friction. My meticulous routines against his casual chaos. My need for silence against his unconscious volume. My careful boundaries against his easy intimacy with the world. Instead, something else emerged, a rhythm that neither of us had planned. He started joining me for dinner without invitation, pulling up a chair to my small table and eating whatever I had prepared for one, stretching portions and conversations to fill the space between us. Movie nights happened by accident. One of us settling on the couch while the other worked nearby, until we were both watching the same screen, sharing commentary and stolen glances. Weekend mornings became exercises in domestic choreography. I would wake to find him making coffee, when had he started drinking coffee, while I tended to my plants. We moved around each other in the kitchen with increasing ease, learning each other's patterns, anticipating needs before they were voiced. He began borrowing my clothes without asking. First a t-shirt when his were all dirty, then a sweater when the October air turned sharp. Seeing him wear my things created a strange intimacy I wasn't prepared for. My scent mixed with his, my choices draped across his broader frame. I told myself it meant nothing, that straight men were comfortable with these kinds of casual exchanges. But then there were the nights when he would fall asleep on the couch instead of going out with friends from work. Mornings when I would find him still there, curled under the throw blanket I kept for cold evenings, looking younger in sleep than his 31 years suggested. I would make breakfast for two without thinking, and he would wake to the sound of eggs hitting the pan, stretching and smiling like this was exactly where he belonged. The way he watched me sketch when he thought I wasn't looking became impossible to ignore. I would catch him in my peripheral vision, studying the movement of my hand across paper, following the emergence of lines into shapes, shapes into meaning. Once, I turned quickly and found him so close I could feel his breath on my shoulder. He didn't step away immediately, and neither did I. These moments accumulated like sediment, building something neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. The apartment began to smell like both of us. His cologne mixing with my incense, his coffee blending with my tea, his laughter settling into corners that had only ever held silence. I convinced myself it was circumstance. Proximity breeding familiarity. Two people learning to share space in a city that makes intimacy inevitable and meaningless all at once. But late at night, when he was out and the apartment felt too empty, I knew I was lying to myself about what this was becoming. The invitation comes on a Thursday evening in November, wrapped in the mundane language of practical necessity. Damien stands in the kitchen doorway, work clothes dusty with drywall powder, holding a notice from his building management about fumigation scheduled for the weekend. Just for 2 nights, he says, running his hand through hair that needs cutting. He'll crash on the couch. Won't be any trouble. I agree too quickly, the word yes leaving my mouth before I have time to consider what I'm agreeing to. 2 nights feels manageable, temporary, like a favor between roommates that won't disturb the careful equilibrium we've built. But even as I nod and tell him it's no problem, something in my chest tightens with anticipation I don't want to examine. Friday comes and goes without ceremony. He sleeps on the couch as promised, folding his long frame onto cushions that were never meant to accommodate someone his size. I wake Saturday morning to find him stretched awkwardly, one arm hanging toward the floor, neck bent at an angle that will leave him stiff and complaining. The throw blanket has twisted around his waist, leaving his chest bare to the morning air, and I stand in the hallway longer than I should, watching the rise and fall of his breathing. Saturday night becomes Sunday, and Sunday stretches into Monday. The fumigation is finished, his building declared safe for habitation, but he doesn't mention leaving. Instead, he begins to inhabit my space with increasing permanence. A toothbrush appears in the cup beside my sink. Blue bristles against the white ceramic, foreign and familiar all at once. His work boots find their way to the mat beside the door, creating a pair where there used to be only mine. His scent begins to mingle with my soap in ways that make the bathroom feel different when I shower. Sandalwood and mint now carry traces of him. Something clean and masculine that I can't identify, but find myself seeking in the steam that fills the small space. I tell myself I'm imagining it, that proximity is playing tricks with my senses. By Wednesday, I find him asleep in my bed. I come home from a client meeting to discover him sprawled across my mattress, still wearing jeans but shirtless, one arm flung across the pillow where I usually rest my head. The couch was giving him back pain, he explains without opening his eyes, voice thick with sleep and unapologetic. He looks so settled there, so right against my sheets, that I don't have the heart to ask him to move. I don't ask questions that night, or any night after. Questions would require answers, and answers would demand acknowledgement of what's happening between us. Instead, I adapt to this new reality with the same careful accommodation I've learned to practice in all areas of my life. I sleep on the couch that first night, then beside him the next, maintaining a careful distance that feels both respectful and torturous. We develop a rhythm that exists in the space between spoken agreement and silent understanding. He cooks dinner while I water my plants, our movements choreographed by weeks of practice. We fall asleep to late-night shows, the blue glow of the television casting shadows across faces that have grown familiar in the dark. He sleeps on his side, facing away from me, but sometimes in the deepest part of night, I wake to find his hand reaching across the space between us, fingers brushing my arm or hip as if seeking confirmation that I'm still there. Morning brings the careful dance of 2 people sharing a bathroom, brushing teeth side by side in the mirror, our reflections caught together in ways that feel both natural and impossible. He uses my shampoo now, claims it works better than whatever he was buying before. The sight of him emerging from the shower with hair that smells like my choices creates an intimacy I'm not prepared for. Nothing is defined between us. Nothing is discussed. We exist in this liminal space where everything feels different, but nothing has officially changed. I tell myself this is friendship, that the way his touch lingers on my shoulder when he passes behind me is just comfort. That straight men do this all the time, share beds and bathrooms and the small intimacies of domestic life without it meaning anything beyond convenience. But then one night, while washing dishes, he begins to sing under his breath. Not humming, not the unconscious soundtrack that usually accompanies his movement through the apartment, but actual words to a song I recognize immediately. Something I mentioned weeks ago during one of our late-night conversations, when wine had loosened my tongue enough to share stories I usually keep buried. I had told him about my first heartbreak, about the song that played on repeat during those hollow weeks when I thought I would never feel whole again. A melody that could still stop me in my tracks, even years later, even when I thought I had moved past the pain it represented. And now here he is, singing it softly while his hands move through soapy water, as if these words and this melody belong to him too. I stand frozen in the hallway, listening to his voice rap around lyrics I thought I was the only one who remembered, and realize that Damien has been paying attention to details I tried to forget. That somewhere in the accumulation of shared meals and borrowed clothes and nights spent sleeping in the same bed, he has been cataloging the pieces of me I thought I kept hidden. The recognition hits me like cold water, sudden and clarifying. This isn't friendship. This isn't convenience. This is something else entirely, something that has been growing in the spaces between us while I convinced myself it was nothing. I retreat to my room before he can see me, heart pounding with the weight of understanding I'm not ready to carry. Something changes in me after that night in the hallway, listening to him sing words I thought belonged only to my past. I begin sketching him without conscious intention, my hand moving across paper while my mind focuses elsewhere. His hands first, the way they curve around a coffee mug, fingers thick from years of construction work, but surprisingly gentle when they touch things that matter. Then his jawline, the slope of his shoulder when he leans against the kitchen counter in the morning light, the curve of his back when he sleeps facing away from me in what used to be my bed alone. I hide these drawings in the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath tax documents and old client contracts, as if burying them might make them less true. But I keep drawing them anyway, compelled by something I can't name to capture the details of his presence in my life. The way afternoon light catches in his hair when he sits by the window reading. The concentration that settles across his features when he's trying to fix something that's broken. The soft vulnerability of his mouth when he thinks no one is looking. We begin to share more than space and meals and the domestic routines that have become second nature. Stories emerge in the quiet hours between dinner and sleep, fragments of ourselves offered like gifts in the blue glow of late-night television. He tells me about growing up the middle child in a family where attention had to be earned through volume and performance. About jobs that paid bills but never felt like choices he made for himself. Everyone else has a blueprint, he says one night, voice heavy with something that might be regret. I'm just drywall and duct tape, holding things together until something better comes along. The admission surprises me with its honesty, its willingness to expose the uncertainty he usually keeps hidden beneath confidence and easy laughter. I turn toward him in the dim light, seeing his profile outlined against the window, and before I can stop myself, I tell him he's more than that. He looks at me then, really looks, and something passes between us that feels like recognition. Our conversations begin to stretch later into the night, words flowing with the ease of people who have learned each other's rhythms. He asks about my art, about the choice to freelance, about the solitude I cultivated so carefully before he arrived. I find myself explaining things I rarely voice, the way drawing feels like translation, turning internal landscapes into something visible, something that might be understood by someone else. He listens with an attention that feels different from the polite interest most people offer when I talk about my work. His questions dig deeper, asking not just about technique, but about intention, about the stories I'm trying to tell with charcoal and ink. When I admit that most of my work feels like confession, like evidence of feelings I don't know how to express directly, he nods as if this makes perfect sense. The physical boundaries between us continue to blur with each passing day. He starts joining me on errands without invitation, grocery shopping, trips to the art supply store, weekend walks through Prospect Park when the city feels too small to contain the restless energy that builds between us. We move through these ordinary activities with the comfortable synchronization of people who have been doing this for years instead of months. He waits up for me after gallery openings and client meetings, claiming he can't sleep when the apartment feels empty. I come home to find him on the couch with a book or his phone, but something in his posture tells me he's been listening for my key in the lock. We sit in the dark sometimes, not talking, just existing in the same space while the city settles around us. These silences feel like conversation, like communication that happens beneath the level of words. Then one night in December, 3 weeks after the fumigation that was supposed to last 2 nights, I wake from a nightmare that leaves me gasping and disoriented. The old dream, the one that used to visit regularly before I learned to manage my anxiety with tea and routine and the careful construction of a life that feels safe. In the dream, I am always alone, calling for help that never comes, drowning in spaces that should feel like home. I surface from sleep with my heart pounding and my sheets soaked with sweat, the phantom taste of panic bitter in my mouth. But before I can fully orient myself to waking, there's warmth beside me. Damien's hand on my back, his voice low and steady, grounding me in the present moment. "You're okay," he says, and the words carry more certainty than I feel. "You're safe." His palm moves in slow circles between my shoulder blades, and gradually my breathing slows, my pulse returning to normal. He doesn't ask about the nightmare, doesn't push for explanation. He just stays, solid and present, until the last tremors of fear fade from my body. When morning comes, neither of us moves. His arm remains draped across my waist, heavy and warm, while pale winter light filters through curtains I forgot to close. I lie still, cataloging the weight of him against me, the rhythm of his breathing against my neck, the way our legs have somehow tangled together during the night. I should feel awkward about this intimacy, should create distance between us with jokes or practical concerns about getting ready for work. Instead, I find myself memorizing the moment, the scent of his skin, the way his hair looks mussed against my pillow, the complete rightness of waking up this close to another person. He stirs eventually, consciousness returning slowly, but when he realizes our position, he doesn't pull away. His arm tightens slightly around my waist, as if confirming that this is where he wants to be. We don't discuss it that morning or any morning after. But something has shifted between us, some final boundary crossed in the vulnerability of sleep and comfort, and the simple act of staying when staying mattered most. The watching begins subtly, so gradually that at first I convince myself I'm imagining it. Damien's eyes following me as I move through the apartment, lingering when he thinks I'm not paying attention. I catch him studying my face while I sketch at the kitchen table, his expression questioning, as if he's searching for something in my features that might explain what's happening between us. The weight of his attention feels different now, heavier with intention. When I look up from my drawing to find him watching me from the couch, he doesn't immediately look away like he used to. Instead, he holds my gaze for a moment too long, and something passes between us that feels like a question neither of us knows how to ask. It's a Tuesday in late December when everything shifts. He comes home from work carrying a bottle of wine and 2 containers of takeout from the Thai place 3 blocks away, the one we've been meaning to try but never quite got around to ordering from. The gesture feels deliberate in a way that makes my pulse quicken, like he's been planning this moment rather than stumbling into it. We eat at the small table by the window, the city sparkling below us in the early darkness of winter. The wine is cheap but decent, and it loosens something in both of us that has been held too tightly for too long. Our conversation flows with unusual ease, touching on work and books and the small frustrations of daily life. But underneath it all, I can feel something building, some pressure that demands release. Halfway through the second glass, he sets down his fork and looks at me with an expression I can't decipher. The question comes quietly, almost hesitant, as if he's afraid of the answer. "Do you think it's weird that I've stayed?" The words hang in the air between us, loaded with implications I'm not ready to unpack. I take another sip of wine, buying time, studying his face in the warm light from the lamp beside us. There's vulnerability in his eyes that I've never seen before, a kind of openness that makes my chest tight. I don't answer immediately, and in the silence he continues, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm pretending I don't know what this is." The admission stops my breath. Here it is, finally, acknowledgement of the thing we've been dancing around for months, the reality we've both been too afraid to name. I set down my glass carefully, precisely, aware that my hands are trembling slightly. "And what is it?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want to hear the answer. He's quiet for a long moment, his fingers turning his wine glass in slow circles, leaving water rings on the wood table. When he speaks, his voice carries a weight that makes me lean forward to catch every word. "I think I feel safest when I'm with you." The simplicity of it hits me harder than any grand declaration could. Not love, not desire, not any of the complicated emotions I've been wrestling with in the dark corners of my own heart. Safety. The thing I've spent years trying to create for myself in this apartment, with my plants and my tea and my careful routines. The thing I thought I could only find in solitude. Silence falls between us, thick with possibility and terror. The wine has made me warm, made my thoughts slower and more honest than they usually are. I can feel myself standing at the edge of something that will change everything. And for a moment, I'm paralyzed by the magnitude of choice. Then he leans forward, just slightly, his eyes searching my face. The movement is so small it might be unconscious, but it breaks something loose in my chest. Without thinking, without permission, I find myself moving toward him too, drawn by gravity or wine or the simple inevitability of what we've been building toward. But at the last moment, when I can feel the warmth of his breath on my face, panic floods through me like ice water. I turn away, heart hammering against my ribs, all the old fears rushing back in a tidal wave of self-preservation. I can't be a placeholder, I say, the words tumbling out before I can stop them. The wine has made me honest in ways I didn't intend, stripping away the careful diplomacy I usually use to protect myself. The silence that follows is different from before, charged with hurt and confusion and the sudden distance that opens between us like a chasm. I can feel him pulling back without looking at him, can sense the careful way he's reassembling his composure. He doesn't argue, doesn't ask what I mean by placeholder. Maybe he understands better than I do what I'm afraid of, that this is experimentation for him, curiosity about something he's never felt before, that I'm a safe space for him to explore questions about himself without real consequences. Because what could I possibly mean to someone who has always known exactly who he's supposed to be? When I finally look up, he's already pushing back from the table, his face closed off in a way I haven't seen since those first awkward weeks when we were still strangers learning to share space. The wine sits abandoned between us, the takeout containers growing cold, evidence of an evening that promised intimacy but delivered only the sharp edges of my own fear. He doesn't say anything as he clears the table, moving with the mechanical efficiency of someone putting distance between himself and a mistake. I sit frozen, watching him retreat into politeness, and realize I've just destroyed something precious because I was too afraid to let it exist. He leaves the kitchen without looking back, and I hear his bedroom door close with a soft click that sounds like finality. I sit alone in the wreckage of our almost moment, surrounded by the scent of uneaten food and the weight of words I can't take back, understanding too late that sometimes the thing we fear most is exactly the thing we need to survive. The next few days pass like a held breath, each hour stretching longer than it should. Damien keeps his distance with the careful precision of someone who has learned exactly how much space to maintain to avoid accidentally touching. We move through the apartment like ghosts of our former selves, occupying the same rooms but existing in parallel universes that no longer intersect. The easy intimacy we built over months disappears overnight, replaced by the polite choreography of strangers. He makes coffee for one. I cook dinner for one. The bathroom schedule returns to the rigid efficiency of those first weeks when we were still learning each other's rhythms. He's back to sleeping in his own room, and the sudden absence of his warmth beside me makes my bed feel vast and cold. I throw myself into work with the desperate intensity of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. Commissions that would normally take me days I finish in hours, my hands moving across paper with a restless energy that mirrors the churning in my chest. The drawings multiply, architectural studies, portrait work, abstract pieces that look like emotional weather patterns. Anything to keep my mind occupied and my hands busy. But sleep becomes elusive again, and in the quiet hours before dawn, I find myself staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment at the kitchen table when everything went wrong. The look on his face when I turned away. The careful way he gathered himself back together after I said those words that cut deeper than I intended. The sound of his door closing like a period at the end of a sentence I didn't mean to finish. The apartment feels hollow now, like a museum of what we almost had. Every shared surface carries the ghost of our former closeness. The kitchen table where we ate meals together, the couch where we fell asleep watching television, the bathroom where we used to brush our teeth side by side like an old married couple. The silence that used to feel companionable now presses against my ears like pressure before a storm. I start sketching more aggressively, my charcoal wearing down to nubs as I try to capture something I can't name. The drawings become increasingly abstract, all sharp angles and smudged shadows, as if my emotional landscape is translating itself onto paper without my conscious permission. I fill an entire sketchbook in 3 days, then start another, driven by a compulsion I don't understand but can't resist. On Friday evening, while searching for a clean eraser in my desk drawer, my fingers brush against something that doesn't belong. A piece of paper, folded small and careful, tucked between tax documents and old client invoices. For a moment, I think it's something I put there and forgot, but the handwriting isn't mine. I unfold it slowly, recognizing Damien's careful script before I process the words themselves. The note is brief, economical in the way he approaches most things, but each word carries weight that makes my hands shake as I read. I don't know what I am, but I know it feels right with you, and I'm scared I've ruined it. The simplicity of it breaks something open in my chest. No grand declarations or dramatic promises, just honesty rendered in blue ink on notebook paper. An admission that costs him something to make, especially knowing I might never find it, might never understand what he was trying to say in the aftermath of our disaster. I read it 3 times, memorizing each word, each carefully formed letter, before the full implications hit me. He wrote this after that night. After I turned away and called myself a placeholder and created distance between us that felt like abandonment. He wrote this knowing I might reject it, might use it as evidence of confusion or experimentation or all the things I convinced myself this was. But what I see in these words isn't confusion. It's clarity of a different kind, not about labels or categories or the neat boxes society provides for understanding ourselves, but about feeling. About the simple recognition that something between us works in a way that transcends definition. I sit in my room that night, the note spread flat on my desk beside my latest drawings, and realize I've been asking the wrong questions. Not what this makes him, or what it makes us, but whether the feeling itself is real. Whether the safety he talked about, the rightness he's describing, is worth more than the certainty of labels. The weekend stretches ahead of us like a test neither of us knows how to pass. Saturday morning arrives with the kind of gray January light that makes everything look muted and uncertain. I make coffee for 2 out of habit, then stare at the extra cup like evidence of my own hope. When Damien emerges from his room, hair still messed from sleep, I'm standing in the kitchen with his note in my hand and my heart in my throat. He stops when he sees me, something in his posture shifting from casual to alert, as if he can sense that the careful distance we've maintained is about to collapse. Neither of us speaks for a long moment. The coffee maker hisses and gurgles, filling the silence with familiar sounds that belong to our former life, when mornings meant shared space and easy conversation. Now everything feels fragile, like one wrong word could shatter whatever chance we have left. He doesn't ask about the note, but I can see recognition in his eyes when he notices it in my hand. His face remains carefully neutral, but there's something in his posture that suggests he's bracing for impact, preparing for another rejection that might be final this time. I close the drawer where I found his words, the small sound loud in the morning quiet. The gesture feels symbolic, like putting away the evidence of our separate selves, the careful boundaries we've used to protect ourselves from exactly this moment. I didn't leave after the shower, he says quietly, breaking the silence with words that carry us back to where this all began. Because I didn't want to be anywhere else. The honesty in his voice strips away the last of my defenses. I look at him, really look, and see not confusion or experimentation, but the same recognition I've been fighting in myself for months. The knowledge that this thing between us doesn't need labels to be real, doesn't require definition to matter. Then stop waiting for permission, I say, the words coming from somewhere deeper than thought, somewhere that understands what we both need to hear. He doesn't move immediately, as if testing whether I mean it this time. But something in my expression must convince him, because the careful distance in his posture begins to soften, replaced by something that looks like hope. Time moves differently after that morning in the kitchen, measured not in days or weeks, but in the gradual accumulation of small certainties. We don't rush to define what we've become or create rules for how this should work. Instead, we learn to exist in the space between questions and answers, finding comfort in the simple fact of choosing each other, again and again, without needing to explain why. The first night he stays in my bed after our conversation, we lie on opposite sides of the mattress like parentheses around empty space. Not touching, but present, aware of each other's breathing, the small sounds of settling into sleep, The way morning light will find us still here, still choosing this. Sometimes nothing happens beyond the quiet intimacy of shared rest. Sometimes everything does. But it's not performance or experimentation or any of the things I feared it might be. It's simply us, learning what it means to be together without apology. The careful boundaries we maintained for so long continue to dissolve, but slowly, with intention rather than accident. He starts leaving his clothes in my dresser drawer, mixed with mine in a way that makes sorting laundry an exercise in recognition, which t-shirt belongs to whom, which socks have been borrowed and never returned. The bathroom accumulates 2 razors, 2 deodorants, the blue toothbrush finding permanent residence beside mine in the ceramic cup. I draw less frantically now, my sketchbooks filling with different kinds of images. Not the desperate abstractions of those hollow days after our confrontation, but careful observations of a life being lived. His hands cupped around a coffee mug in morning light. The way afternoon sun cuts across our kitchen table. 2 sets of keys hanging by the door. The simple domestic poetry of a shared existence that no longer needs to hide itself. Work continues, client meetings and gallery deadlines providing the external structure that keeps us tethered to the world beyond our apartment. But the quality of my art changes, becomes less defensive, more open. I start signing pieces I would have hidden before, displaying work that feels too honest, too revealing. When clients comment on the shift in my style, I tell them I've been exploring themes of home and belonging. It's true enough, even if they don't understand what kind of exploration I mean. February arrives with the kind of false spring that makes New Yorkers shed their coats too early, only to bundle up again when reality reasserts itself. We develop new rhythms for this life we're building. Weekend grocery shopping together, evening walks through neighborhoods we're learning to see as ours rather than mine. He joins me at gallery openings sometimes, standing beside me while I explain my work to people who nod and smile, and buy pieces they'll hang in spaces I'll never see. He doesn't pretend to understand art in any academic sense, but he watches people's faces when they look at my drawings, notices which pieces draw attention and which ones people pass by quickly. Later, walking home through streets that smell like possibility and exhaust, he'll tell me what he observed, offer insights about human nature that surprise me with their accuracy. The guitar case in his room gathers dust, forgotten in favor of other kinds of music. Instead, he sings while cooking dinner, humming melodies I don't recognize while chopping vegetables or stirring sauce. His voice has become part of the apartment soundtrack, along with the hum of the bathroom fan and the whistle of the kettle and all the small sounds that make a space feel lived in. One morning in early March, I wake to the familiar sound of the shower running, steam beginning to curl under the bathroom door. But this time, instead of sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee, I'm lying in what has become our bed, listening to water against tile and Damien's off-key, singing echoing off bathroom walls. When the door creaks open and he emerges with that same towel slung low around his hips, hair dark with water, body haloed in steam and morning light, everything feels both exactly the same and completely different. He pads across the room with the same confident ease he's always had, but now his destination is clear. Now he belongs here in ways that go beyond practicality or convenience. He settles on the edge of the bed, water still beating on his shoulders, and leans down to kiss my forehead, then my cheek, then my mouth with the casual intimacy of someone who has earned the right to these gestures through time and choice and the simple willingness to stay. I left my old place for good, he says against my lips, voice still rough with sleep and steam. It's not a question or a request for permission. It's information, offered the same way he might tell me about work schedules or dinner plans. A fact about our shared reality that doesn't require discussion because we both already know it's true. I don't reply with words. Instead, I reach for my sketchbook on the nightstand, turn to a fresh page, and begin drawing. Not his face or his hands or any of the physical details I've been cataloging for months. Instead, I sketch something simpler and more honest. 2 toothbrushes in a ceramic cup, morning light streaming through a window, the outline of a life that has learned to make room for more than one person's dreams. He watches me work, chin propped on his hand, and when I'm finished he studies the drawing with the same attention he's always given my art. But this time, his smile carries recognition of something that belongs to both of us. No labels. No neat ending. No dramatic declarations or promises about forever. Just this moment, this choice, this quiet life we've built together in the spaces between questions and answers. I closed the sketchbook and let it be enough.